Welcome to lesson 9.6. Today we're going to talk adding probabilities. So in the last lesson we discussed using multiplication to determine the probability of more than one thing happening at the same time. Today we're going to talk about when we should use addition to find the probability of a compound event. So compound events using the word or in the problem will tell us to use addition to solve that problem. So last lesson we were using the word and. This lesson we're looking for the word or. And when we see or, that tells us we need to use addition. So again, when a compound event uses the word or to combine multiple events we want to have happen, we're going to use addition. So for example, if the question was, if a six-sided die is rolled, what is the probability of rolling a 4 or a 5? See how they use the word or here? We would take both probabilities, rolling a 4 and rolling a 5, and add them together to find the answer. So we take the probability of rolling a 4 and the probability of rolling a 5, add them together, simplify it down, and we'd get our answer. So our first example, when we roll a six-sided die, what is the probability of rolling a 1 or a 3? Okay, so P of 1 or 3, we take the probability of 1 and we add it to the probability of 3. Okay, so the probability of 1 is a sixth, the probability of 3 is a sixth. We add those two together. So now we just add the top and we keep the bottom the same. So we get 2/6, which simplifies down to 1/3. So remember, in order to add fractions together, we have to have that bottom number be the same. If it's not the same, we have to multiply one or both equations so that it is the same. Okay, so remember that is going to have to happen first before we add them together if needed. So for our first example, there are 8 blue, 7 green, and 5 red marbles in a bag. We're going to draw one marble from the bag, and we're going to take a note of the color, and then we're going to put it back in. Okay, we're only going to draw once. So we're going to find the following probabilities. Again, just like the last lesson, we need to know the total first. So if we add up 8, 7, and 5, we get a total of 20. Okay? So if we want the probability of a blue or a green, okay? Now for this one, we don't want to simplify the probabilities before we add them together. And you'll see why when we do this, okay? So if we want the probability of blue or green, we take the probability of blue plus the probability of green. Okay? So now, probability of blue, there are 8 blue out of a total of 20 marbles. For green, there are 7 out of a total of 20, and we're going to add them together. Now the reason why we don't simplify them down is because we want this bottom number to be the same. Okay? And if we simplify the 8 over 20, it'll change that denominator, and we don't want that to happen. So since our bottom numbers are the same, it'll stay the same on the bottom. We add 8 and 7 together and get 15, so we get 15 over 20. Simplifying that down, you should know that we can take a 5 out of both of those, giving us an answer of 3/4. For the next one, the probability of green or red, we take the probability of green plus the probability of red. For green, there are 7 out of 20. For red, there are 5 out of 20. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to add those two together. Okay, bottom numbers are the same, so I can put that as the bottom in my answer, and I can add straight across. 7 plus 5 gives me 12. 12 over 20, I can take a 4 out of both of those. That's going to give me an answer of 3/5. For our last example, we want red or blue, so I can take the probability of red and add it to the probability for blue. We know both of the probabilities already. Red is 5 over 20. Blue is 8 over 20. Again, I'm looking for the denominators to be the same, and they are, so I can put that as the denominator for my answer, and I can add straight across. 5 plus 8 gives me 13. 13 over 20 cannot be simplified, so I leave that as my answer. So the probability of red or blue is 13 over 20. Our next example, there are 7 baseball, 6 football, and 9 basketball cards in a container. We randomly draw one card from the container and we're going to put it back in after we draw. We're going to find the following probabilities. So again, before we start, we need to know the total. So if I add all these up, 7 plus 6 plus 9, I get 22. Okay, so that's going to be the bottom of all my fractions. So for football or baseball, I take the probability of football and I'm going to add it to the probability of baseball. For football, there are 6 cards out of 22, so probability of football is 6 over 22. Again, for or, I don't want to simplify it down. And I'm going to add that to the probability of baseball, which is 7 over 22. Okay, again, the goal is to have the denominators the same, which they are because I didn't simplify them down. So I keep that 22 as my denominator. Adding 6 and 7 together, I get 13. 13 over 22 does not simplify, so the probability of football or baseball is 13 over 22. For basketball or football, I take the probability of basketball plus the probability of football. Probability of basketball, there are 9 basketball cards out of 22, so 9 over 22. Probability for football was 6 over 22. Add those together to get my probability for or. Now again, denominators are the same, so they'll stay the same for the answer. I add the tops, 9 plus 6. That'll get me 15. 15 over 22 does not simplify down. So my final answer for the probability of basketball or football is 15 over 22. For the last example here, we've got the probability of baseball or basketball. So I take the probability of baseball plus the probability of basketball. Probability of baseball is 7 over 22. Probability of basketball is 9 over 22. Okay, again, the denominators are already the same, so I can keep that as my denominator. And I add straight across, 7 plus 9 gives me 16. 16 over 22 I can simplify by taking a 2 out, so I'm going to need to do that, giving me 8 over 11. So the probability of baseball or basketball being drawn is 8 over 11. So the big thing to remember here, again, when they use this word or in the probability, that means we need to add our probabilities together. So again, and means multiply, or means add. So keep that in mind as we move forward to our quiz and our test.